From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I'm Carla Gonzalez. We begin in Honduras, where the President Juan Orlando Hernandez is due to be sworn in on Saturday after 2 months of demonstrations and strikes that have left dozens dead. Opposition lawmakers chanted "Out JOH" and "Murderer" on Thursday as the new Congress met for its first session. The opposition alliance says there was fraud in both the presidential and parliamentary elections at the end of November, while the government party is still calling for a dialogue.
I am sure that the approach in matters of state and the debate of the legislative decrees will be enriched with the patriotic contribution of all the political forces represented here. Democracy is ultimately the way to find agreement over our disagreement.
Outside the Congress, thousands of women and other opposition supporters gathered to celebrate Honduran Women's Day and to protest against Juan Orlando Hernandez. They say they will not recognize him as president and accuse the United States of helping to impose him for a second consecutive term against the will of the Honduran people.
Unfortunately, democracy has been lost in this country. We see every day how the dictatorship imposes itself in this country, and therefore a situation that makes it more and more difficult and dangerous to defend the human rights in general in this country.
We don't believe in the United States. We don't believe in a Honduran justice system, since it has always betrayed us. It is the people on the streets who can defend rights and battles.
A judge in Brazil has confiscated the passport of the former president Luis Inácio Lula da Silva and ordered him not to leave the country. On Wednesday, another court upheld a corruption conviction against Lula and increased his sentence to 12 years in prison. The confiscation of the passport relates to another case in which the former president is accused of lobbying for the purchase of Swedish fighter jets by the Brazilian Air Force. On Thursday, the Brazilian Workers' Party went ahead and declared Lula will be its candidate for October's presidential election. The announcement was made in Sao Paulo during a meeting with members of the party, including the former president, Dilma Rousseff. Lula and his supporters insist there is no evidence of corruption against him, and the court actions are politically motivated to prevent him from standing in October.
In my opinion, they haven't condemned me for a crime. I think they are trying to condemn a large part of the Brazilian people who recognize within the PT party, within Lula through the PT party and the social government, the possibility for this country to once again be respected, well-governed, and for the people to once again be happy.
I think we must understand this moment. I don't think we are at a stage in which we are breaking from democracy. I think that the democracy is radicalizing. It became clear yesterday during the ruling, a ruling which is a farce.
As the court case against Lula unfolded, nearly 50,000 people came to Republic Square in Sao Paulo, with thousands more protesting in at least 13 Brazilian capitals.
Masses participated in demonstrations in Sao Paulo, rejecting what they call the lack of evidence in the case against the former president. His sentence was extended from 9 to 12 years, a decision that makes Lula the first former president to be convicted by a criminal court.
From now on, we have to be with the people in the streets on a more frequent basis, explaining that the persecution of Comrade Lula without evidence constitutes a coup within the coup.
Social movements, unions, and leftist parties, even those opposed to the Workers' Party, said that the conviction of Lula is an attack on democracy. Many Petrobras workers came to see Lula, a key figure in the growth of Petrobras. Lula has been fighting the growing privatization of oil.
It's a political persecution of Lula. With Lula, Petrobras increased its investments. Without government investment, during the administration of Lula and Dilma, we hadn't, for example, discovered pre-salt, which is now being sold and delivered at extremely low prices.
Lula called on the people not to worry about him, but to mobilize themselves for national sovereignty. In addition, he said he would continue traversing in the streets with the people.
The court proceedings lasted over 10 consecutive hours. I don't know how many pages they read. Though there has not been a single crime, they are convicting people who have not committed any crimes. The judge simply is of a certain conviction or creates a narrative.
However, after listening to Lula, social movements feel encouraged to do more.
The president of the Dominican Republic, Danilo Medina, announced a dialogue between the Venezuelan government and the opposition will continue on January 28th and 29th. The talks had broke down last week, and he was speaking before the World Economic Forum in Davos. He said it was an important deal to reach a peaceful solution to these tensions that Venezuela is experiencing. Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro has confirmed he will stand again in the election to be held before the end of April. Maduro told a rally of transport workers that he will be a candidate for the poor, the working class, the women, and the youth. The Venezuelan government condemned a statement by the Lima Group of Latin American countries, which criticized the call for early elections. And at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Argentina's President Mauricio Macri said a possible trade deal between the South American bloc, Mercosur, is a natural one because South Americans are descendants of Europeans.
If you really believe that Mercosur is also a good opportunity for the European Union, especially after Brexit. And I think that it's a natural association because South America, we are all descendants from Europe. So it should be the first important agreement before others that we are negotiating. And we are close. We are very close. I'm visiting President Macron tomorrow, and I expect that he will give me good news.
Meanwhile, back in Argentina, protesters from the Barrios de Pie movement have marched in Buenos Aires against government plans to cut back on welfare. The social movement was protesting against the rising cost of basic items, affecting thousands of families. They are calling on the Ministry of Social Development to approve an emergency food law, as child malnutrition rates have risen in low-income neighborhoods.
Today, an ordinary family can't live on what they earn. The government keeps on putting off the cost of basic things. There are more and more cases of malnutrition. Why? Because a standard family doesn't get enough nutrients to get to the end of the month. So what do? They eat flour, noodles, but a child needs vegetables, a balanced diet.
And we'll take a short break now after looking at what our multimedia team is reporting.
South America, we are all descendants from Europe. So it should be the first important agreement before others that we are negotiating. If you really believe that Mercosur is also a good opportunity for the European Union, especially after Brexit. And I think that it's a natural association because South America, we are all descendants from Europe. So it should be the first important agreement before others that we are negotiating.
Welcome back. A petition spearheaded by the National Indigenous Congress in Mexico continues to collect signatures in order to formalize their participation in the July 1st elections. Its spokeswoman, María de Jesús Patricio Martínez, better known as Marichuy, visited Mexico City to gather support.
Playing protest music, social movements from Mexico City took part in a political and cultural event to support the tentative presidential run of the National Indigenous Congress.
This movement shares a belief that we are capable of governing ourselves, and above all, that we are capable of governing our land and our lives in general.
This is the second massive rally to collect signatures in support of the initiative launched by 400 indigenous groups, among them the Zapatista Army of National Liberation.
This is a legitimate proposal that comes from below, that doesn't make any promises. To the contrary, it's an invitation to organize and to defend our dignity in our lands.
Volunteers in support of the head of the Indigenous Council of Government, Maria de Jesus Patricia Martinez, says various political parties have failed them.
Things are only getting worse. The economy worsens. There's more violence, unemployment, there's famine and disinformation. So what good are political parties?
To take part in the elections, the Indigenous Congress and its subsidiaries must collect 860,000 signatures.
We call on you to rise up, to fight back. We must be autonomous in every way possible. We must rise up with whatever is at hand. We make this call because we can see that the war against the working class is going to be worse than ever. The war against the indigenous, against women, against children, against all of us.
Reaching their goal is a complex one. It's difficult and expensive to get the petitions to remote communities.
Even after Pope Francis warned Peru about the urgent need to protect the Amazon and to stop deforestation, the Congress has approved a law that could affect the well-being of indigenous communities and the conservation of national parks.
The Congress led by Keiko Fujimori made a complete change from the Pope's wishes and supported Law 3723, which allows the construction of highways in the Ucayali Amazon. It directly affects 2 indigenous reserves and 3 national parks.
The Peruvian political class kills all calls of action, including the request to respect nature, which is a sign of a cynical and lying class.
For Rumril, this law was advocated as in national interest, one that would help drug traffickers who have taken Pucallpa, the capital of Ucayali, as the center of operations.
All of the high basins of the Ucayali River and its affluents are full of cocaine at this time. This means these roads that Fujimorismo is proposing are landing highways for drug trafficking. These criminals are saying, "Thank you, Congressman Yoshinawa. Thank you, Congressman Gallareta."
This project was rejected in 2017 by the Ministries of Culture and Environment, the United Nations, and the Amazonian communities. They called the law genocidal. Nevertheless, the Fujimori bloc used its majority in Congress to approve it.
We are outraged because just hours after Pope Francis gave his message to the Congress, they approved the law, which is an attack that will trigger protests by the indigenous Amazonian people of Peru.
The communities not only plan to protest, they will seek all legal options. They are also planning to write to the Pope, warning him about what they call immoral actions by the people who just days ago were asking for the Pope's blessings.
Chile's Congress has approved free higher education for the country. The Minister of Education, Paula Narváez, said this is great news for thousands of young Chileans that want their right to education to be guaranteed and recognized. President Michelle Bachelet described the Congress decision as historic. The bill passed with 102 votes in favor and 2 abstentions. In Panama, eviction caused by urban development has become a growing trend. Experts say that this gentrification policy increases the country's housing crisis and affects the real estate boom, which continues to be a serious problem.
This is Brooklyn Cito, a district located in the center of Panama City. The Ministry of Housing evicts people with the promise of making improvements to the area. However, people are skeptical.
They think that the minister won't carry out their promises of allowing us to continue living here. The subsidy that they are giving us is not sufficient to transfer us to other areas. Those of us who have not been able to move went to stay with family members.
After being forgotten for years, these people were evicted with a $1,200 subsidy, which is insufficient when rent is not below $300.
Everything is up in the air for me as a resident. We are not asking for riches from the government, but we just want what is fair for the people. They are playing with our dignity. This is a lie. They are being deceptive here and there, and nothing has been clear. The people really need the subsidy.
This commercial center was also evicted. Experts say that this is due to speculation in the real estate market that increases the value of the land.
A large part of the city has been taken over by real estate speculation and costly apartments in the city of Panama and in general throughout the country. Living in popular neighborhoods and in commercial areas is now less accessible. The poor have to look for alternatives.
Social movements say that in Panama, one of the fastest growing countries in the region, there are more than 1,200,000 homeless people. It's a sign of the inequality brought by the policies of neoliberal lawmakers.
A sunken submarine that once belonged to the notorious drug dealer Pablo Escobar has been found off the coast of Colombia. It is rumored that the submarine could contain the drug baron's $50 billion fortune. Escobar, who died in 1993 and was head of the Medellin drugs cartel, used submarines to ship cocaine from Colombia to the U.S. At the height of his career, he supplied around 80% of all cocaine in the United States. In Guatemala, the Mayan Achi people are celebrating their patron saint, San Pablo Apostol, through a performance called Rabinal Achi. It is a theatrical play animated by masked characters and music with the aim of recalling the conflict between two Mayan states in the 15th century.
Historically called the Shayoctún, the Rabinal Achi dance is a pre-Columbian dynastic drama. It takes place in the town of Rabinal in northern Guatemala.
The Rabinal Achi dance tells the story of a conflict between two major political entities in the region, the Rabinal Achi and the Quiche.
In 2008, UNESCO officially included the dance in the Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity list.
This is our legacy, the one that our ancestors left us, which includes looking after the territory, our culture, and also our Mother Earth.
Our grandfathers and ancestors, they were the ones who made these big festivals.
The Shayoctún is not just a dance, it's a way for the living to get in contact with the dead, recall the ancestors, and perpetuate the heritage. Every year from January 16 to 27, Rabinal municipality becomes a fertile space for religious and cultural practices to blossom. As part of the festival, a representation of San Pablo Apostol is covered with elements Mayans consider representative of their origin, among them 365 feathers.
San Pablo representation also shows Achi people's typical elements, like the Glifio del Toj and the Nahual Toj. In one way or another, the Mayan culture is being preserved and has always been within us.
Participants say the festival is about sharing and living together, and that's why they also mark the day by cooking more than 20,000 tamales.
We are going to share it with the village and everyone else who comes to visit us.
With UNESCO's recognition of the Rabinal dance, the hope is that the ancient pre-Columbian tradition will not disappear.
Santiago Botón, Telesur, Baja Verapaz, Guatemala.
We'll take another short break, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
Are you right? I said I'm going to shoot you. What the fuck? Stop driving me. Stop driving me.
I don't care if your dad's a cop.
Chingue su madre.
Welcome back. The Winter Olympics are set to start in South Korea on February 9th. This year, the event is not just a celebration of sportsmanship. It is seen as a possible catalyst for peace on the Korean peninsula.
North Korea's women's hockey team is in South Korea. They will form a unified Olympic team with their peers from the South for the first time in almost 30 years.
We're in great joy about North Korea and South Korea being one team. If we compete well by uniting our strengths and hearts, I believe we will achieve good results.
For the opening ceremony, participants will march under the Korean unification flag, which will be carried by a representative from the North and the South. 22 athletes from North Korea will compete in ice skating, skiing, and ice hockey.
North Korea's participation in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics will represent the most dramatic scene in the history of the Olympics. It can be a chance to show the value and power of sports when players from two Koreas march together and play games together as a unified team.
North Korea decided to send a delegation to the Winter Olympics after the two Koreas agreed to put aside differences over Kim Jong-un's nuclear missile program. The two sides also vowed to reduce military tension and to reopen a military hotline.
Today is a great moment for the Olympic movement because the Olympic spirit has brought us all together. The Olympic Winter Games Pyeongchang 2018 have opened the door for peaceful dialogue on the Korean peninsula. Our meeting today shows that Olympic sport always builds bridges. It never erects walls.
North and South Korea walked together at the 2000 Sydney Olympics for the first time after they held their first ever summit. For now, the united delegation is seen as a symbol of a possible reconciliation.
Two of the most pressing issues in the U.S. today are school shootings and sexual harassment. There have already been 11 school shootings across the United States in 2018. The most recent happened on January 24th at a Kentucky high school, killing 2 and injuring 18. Meanwhile, the Me Too campaign against sexual harassment has reached the World Economic Forum in Davos. Our correspondent in Washington, Jorge Gestoso, brings us the details from the stories.
Thank you. There's a lot of stress and insecurity among the students in the U.S. in this month of January 2018. So far, in 25 days, 11 shootings, almost one every 2 days. And in many cases, the one who shoot the students are other students. Lately, about 2 days ago in Kentucky, one student of 15 years of age killed 2 of his classmates and wounded about 19 others. And definitely, one of the key issues that comes again to the surface is the gun control. On the other hand, one of the subjects that is already in the surface has to do with sexual harassment among women. The movement Me Too reached Davos, the annual economic forum that started precisely today, and Donald Trump has already arrived. And most of the women there start to bring in their different forums that issue of sexual harassment. In the US, a new poll of ABC News shows that about 60% are pretty much skeptical that progress is going to take place in the short term, but believe that at least creating awareness is a right move in the right direction. Therefore, students killing students at a pace that is absolutely worrisome, and women reacting to the sexual harassment that took place for many, many years, creating more and more awareness through the movement Me Too. We get back to you.
That was Jorge Gestoso from Washington. Now let's have a look at some other stories from around the world.
A fire in a South Korean hospital in the city of Mirayang has killed at least 37 people and injured more than 70. City officials warned that the death toll could rise as a number of patients were in a critical condition. Firefighters evacuated about 200 people from the main hospital building and a nursing home directly behind the hospital. The fire is said to be the deadliest in South Korea in at least a decade. Czech voters are going to vote this weekend in the runoff round of a tight presidential contest in which a pro-EU academic Jiří Drahos seeks to unseat pro-Russian incumbent Miloš Zeman. Many see the vote as a referendum on 73-year-old Zeman and his policy of dividing the country, snubbing media, criticism of immigration from Muslim countries and courting Russia and China. The Czech Republic is the only EU state to have joined the US in recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Tens of thousands have marked Australia Day with mass protests across the country, demanding the date of the national holiday be changed, given its links to colonization and the ill treatment of indigenous aborigines. Australia Day marks the date the British First Fleet sailed into Sydney Harbour in 1788. Aborigines refer to January 26th as Invasion Day, and Australian schools and some universities teach both views.
Today we want to create awareness that Aboriginal people are still here, we're still strong. We see alternatives to this date. It is mixed feelings. Personally, I want a day we can all celebrate, and this is to create awareness that we all can celebrate as Australians, and on January 26th we just can't do it due to the historical facts of this date.
Philippine authorities have said they will remove by force people who have refused to leave a no-go zone around an erupting Mayon volcano as they seek to avoid casualties after tens of thousands of others fled to safety. Despite the danger, hundreds of tourists, including Westerners, are flocking to Legazpi and nearby towns to watch the spectacular eruption up close.
We're happy that we're able to see it with a glow on its crater, and we have that anticipation that you would see a much brighter glow, but you are hoping that it wouldn't be so destructive.
The oldest remains of a modern human outside Africa have been dug up in Israel, offering evidence of what genetic studies have already suggested, that humans migrated out of Africa some 50,000 years earlier than previously thought. Jawbone on several teeth were found at a site called Mislia Cave, which is one of several prehistoric cave sites located on Mount Carmel in Israel.
And a zoo in the central Mexican city of Tlaxcala is unveiling the arrival of its white lion cub. Children who visit the zoo are invited to name the cub, and his name will be revealed in February. The cub was born at the Altiplano Zoo on October 28 and weighs 700 grams. As the cub was rejected by its mother at the time of birth, the cub is being bred by zookeepers and veterinary personnel who ensure it's fed with a special formula until the little one can feed on its own. And with this, we've come to the end of this morning news brief. This and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesurtv.net/English. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Community organization and revolutionary verse fused